Welcome to episode number 259, where I'm speaking with Dr. Paul Dugliss about emotional digestion. We talk about how distraction and lack of awareness affects the digestion of emotions, what happens to unprocessed emotions in the body, and how physical imbalances can be a reflection of what's going on in the emotional body. And of course, Dr. Dugliss gives us lots of tips and advice on how to process emotions. So please stay tuned. Welcome to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. I'm your host, Colette, and I hope to educate and empower you to take charge of your health and well-being, preventing disease in the body and mind so that you can thrive in life. I will be sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, which is the ancient healing tradition from India. Now, if you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend listening to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. And if you like the content, please be sure to subscribe or follow the podcast so the new episodes will automatically download for you. Also, you may want to check out my private Elements community, which is away from social media. It's a safe space for like-minded people to come together, to connect, to share, to support each other, and to continue the conversation from the podcast episodes. Check out the link in the show notes or visit my website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com, and just click on the community tab. And I hope to connect with you there. Thanks for listening. And now here's a new episode. This episode is sponsored by New World Ayurveda. If you're interested in working with client case studies from day one of your training, consider becoming an Ayurvedic practitioner through New World Ayurveda School. This way you learn the theory of Ayurveda at the same time as you learn how to apply it practically. Get a head start on working with clients by learning Ayurveda through being exposed to the most common problems clients face and how to correct them with diet, lifestyle, and herbs. The other interesting thing about New World Ayurveda is that you start learning pulse diagnosis from the very first day. They have had the most experience teaching Ayurveda online than any other Ayurveda school, and they have developed ways of teaching pulse diagnosis at a distance. And you get the chance to study Ayurveda with an MD through Ayurveda's premier online school, New World Ayurveda. For more information, go to newworldayurveda.com, and you'll also find that link in the show notes. Hello and welcome back to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. Today I'm very happy to welcome back Dr. Paul Dugliss, who is a pioneer in the American medical system, being one of the first physicians to integrate the ancient wisdom of Ayurveda into modern healthcare. He has written 7 books on Ayurveda and is a founding member of the National Council on Ayurvedic Education. He has traveled the world as a speaker and is regularly consulted as an expert on a variety of health and consciousness-related projects. Dr. Dugliss has devoted his life to bringing Ayurveda to the mainstream with the New World Ayurveda School and continues to bring to his students an ever-evolving understanding of what living as a conscious, whole person rooted in heart means. Dr. Dugliss, always a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you for joining us again today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me again.
Well, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Emotional digestion. I think it's a great time to cover this subject. I just talked in a previous podcast episode about mental health and Vata season, how Vata can have a tendency to get out of balance at this time of the year, autumn, fall, that cool, windy weather, and it can really affect the mind. And so this is a great follow-up, I think, to talk about emotional digestion. We talk a lot about the digestive process and the importance of digestion in Ayurveda, in particular with Agni, the digestive fire. And I think a great place to start is, well, what does emotional digestion mean?
Yeah, that is a great question. You know, it is the understanding that we exist on multiple planes. So, we have on the physical plane this process of breaking down food and really assimilating the the essence of the food, and using that to rebuild the body and to really convert the food into that essence of liveliness, into ojas. And the same processes are reflected on all the levels of our being. So emotional digestion refers to that process by which we become aware, we take in emotion, and we process it. In other words, we metabolize the emotion and we draw from it the essence of its meaning and the essence of the liveliness and the life supporting aspect of that emotion, so that we can integrate that into greater liveliness and greater light and greater love. And it is a process where, just like with digestion, there are parts of the food that we can't digest, that are eliminated. Mm. And just like that with emotion, there's often an energy that part of which we can process and add to our liveliness, and part of which we just release, as it's kind of a disturbance in the flow of our being, the flow of our awareness. So, our awareness can get trapped. It can get grabbed into an emotion. And this happens, like you were saying, we're coming into this Vata season. And with all the variability and all the change, if we're not fully established in pure consciousness, in the joy of being in the light and love of that divinity within ourselves, then the mind gets grabbed by the emotion. Mm-hmm. And then we need to be able to process those energies in such a way that we can come back to the true self and not be so swayed away. And when we fully process, then we gain the beauty of it. And that can sound really bizarre, but there's wisdom in how this system is created, how the physical body. I mean, if you had to try to map out all the biochemical processes that are involved in digestion, you would go crazy, because nobody knows that. It's so complicated.
Yeah.
And similarly, on the emotional level, it's not a mental thing. It's something that takes place within awareness, where we extract the wisdom that is there. Mm-hmm. And so fear, for example, may be uncomfortable, but if we can sort out that energy from how it's trying to operate, often it's trying to protect us from something, and that's good. And that's often where the fear got started. It was trying to teach us something about, this is how you can stay safe, stay vigilant. And so there can be some wisdom in it that we can gain, like, okay, but if we don't process the energy, then we get stuck with anxiety. If we do, we allow that energy to turn into and be transformed, to be metabolized into excitement. Mm. So maybe you're afraid to give a speech. Well, that fear comes up. Well, there's some wisdom there. In some way, it again, this is where we need to use our awareness and really be fully present to the emotion. and really be curious about it, and really actually center in the heart, and really be loving of it, to become aware of what's the wisdom that is there. And so it may be trying to protect us from, I don't know, if maybe you're giving a talk at your work or something, or maybe it's trying to protect you from losing your job. Well, that's a positive thing.
Yes. Yeah. It has a purpose.
It has a purpose. Mm-hmm. And as we metabolize the emotion, we can come to recognize, oh, okay, that's not exactly reality. I'm not going to lose my job if this doesn't go well, but I do want to respect, in presenting this new idea, respect my bosses and their ideas, and not just insult them and so forth. So it's some wisdom, something of value that we can gain as we process. And as we are fully present to it, we become aware of the energy of it, and we transform that into, oh, this could be really exciting. Right. Giving this could actually change, the administration's mind about this policy or this approach, and or open them to creating this whole new project or this whole new invention. And so it's in that transformation of that we see emotional digestion. We see the metabolism and transformation of emotion into wisdom and into positive energy.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And these emotions are energy. Like stress and emotions influence our digestion and digestive system, and vice versa. And so we feel that in things like when we have acute stress, it alters our appetite. Like you said, when there's fear, there's a purpose for it, but also it has effect on our digestive system, because the blood is taken away from our digestive system. And maybe if it's acute stress or fear, that it's going to our extremities in case we need to fight or flee. So like you said, it's about having the awareness and not letting these emotions take you for a ride. So just having awareness, being able to decipher the situation, digest in the situation, and also learn the lessons, but not allowing these emotions to overcome you.
Yes, and I think there's two elements to it. One is to really be present to it. A lot of times when it gets into being stressful is because we actually haven't processed it in the past. And so it's building on a lot of energies that are still held in the emotional body.
Right. So it's triggered something, a previous.
So it triggers something that old that is there. And then it has so much energy that it can, as you say, disturb digestion and so forth. And so what we're talking about with improving emotional digestion is really also doing a cleanup process on those elements that are left over. There's also an element of awareness that as we become more present to the emotions and are able to meet them with a heart-centered approach, where we're able to come into greater acceptance of them, then there's not as much intensity. It's not that we overcome the emotion. It's that we're fully present to it. But we're present to it not in that we dive into it. We're present to it in that we center first in our hearts, in the spiritual heart, I should say, because often people associate the heart with emotion.
Yeah.
So it's really being centered in our being and being in presence with the emotion. And when we do that, then the body doesn't take so much of a hit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's key to have that awareness. So I think it would be helpful to explain to people a little bit about how do you know if you're being triggered by something? How does maybe an example of how it could occur in the body? Maybe if there's old emotional baggage, how do people recognize that?
Yeah, I think this element of when there is this older stuff, the mind almost goes into a hyper mode trying to process it. And a lot of times it has difficulty. And so one of the things is that we get totally absorbed in it. And if we're more used to processing things mentally, we keep thinking about it. We can't let it go.
Right.
It's like, how could that person do that? I just don't see how they could do that. And, well, I've got to do my work here, but, I really can't see how they could do that.
Yes. Yeah. Being totally overwhelmed and overcome by it.
Yeah. And totally absorbed in it.
Yeah.
So that we lose awareness of our being. We lose awareness of ourselves. We lose awareness of that heart space of the universal heart, and it just dominates our experience. So that's I think the biggest key into knowing when you're triggered, and then all of us react differently with those, and so some of us again more mentally processed, some of us more physically processed. This is where people try to work things through, but in a physical way. And so we, then we do have the stomach upset, and try to work it through on the physical way, in the physical body. And this is why it becomes important to be aware that there is emotional digestion, so that we're not pushing it into the physical or pushing it up to the mental. A lot of times in meditation, people struggle because there's an overwhelming number of thoughts in the meditation. And that's often a sign of some emotional energy that is trying to be processed in these higher frequencies, in the mental or intuitive or spiritual. And so it gets pushed up into a lot of mental activity in meditation.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, as you said, people process emotion differently, and there can be, some of us may hold on to emotions, or some may suppress it, or some may be overwhelmed, or even a fear of letting go. So for each person, it can be very different. Some may be depleted by this emotion. Others may, resort to emotional eating, and then there may be too much tissue. So it can manifest in different ways, right, in the body and mind.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And this is where, again, a lot of it, though, particularly in our current society, a lot of what happens is that we go into distraction and lack of awareness, or is the quality of our experience and the quality of our life. And then, we try to distract ourselves with staying hyper busy, or we distract ourselves with, the social media, or, video, or with, as you were saying, emotional eating, or some other way to stand in opposition to the experience of the emotion.
Right, exactly. And meanwhile, not only is it putting pressure on your body physically and mentally, but you can't continue. Something's going to give at some point if we are distracting ourselves. And so what happens, this energy that's unprocessed energy. This energy gets stuck in the body, right? It's in the tissues. Could you explain a little bit about that, please?
Yeah. So it's one of the more fascinating studies comes from the study of transplant patients. And there was this this woman who had congenital heart disease who knew that at a certain point, in order to live, she would need a heart transplant. And so she was very, very conscientious about, exercise, about diet. She was vegetarian and, very careful about the type of oils that she would take and so forth and so on. And around in her 40s, she finally, they just had nothing left to offer except for the transplant. Mm. And she underwent the heart transplant and recovered well. And within a few weeks, she noticed this peculiar thing where whenever she would drive by a McDonald's, she would have this urge to turn in and to get a hamburger.
Oh my goodness.
Which she would resist, but she was like, this is bizarre.
Yeah.
Where is this coming from? And she had the intuition it had something to do with her new heart, with the heart transplant. And so she asked the heart transplant team if she could get them to talk to the family of the person who had donated the heart and allow her to thank them and to meet and thank them and just to ask a few questions. And so it was arranged. They agreed to it, and it turns out it was a 19-year-old boy who had been in a car accident. Mm. And in talking to his parents, they said that he had at 18 moved out on his own, and that he didn't know how to cook, and that he loved McDonald's.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And so this started, this concept of cellular memory. Yeah. And it's something that in other, not just in heart transplant, but in other transplant patients that they have noticed that there often are certain things that seem to come up that are not theirs. Wow. And so there is this element of cellular memory that things that are experienced does get enmeshed, I guess you could say, in the cellular framework. Mm. And can be transmitted in a transplant situation. Well, in our bodies, then we often hold emotion. Again, when we haven't learned this emotional processing, then just like physical ama gets lodged in the physical body, we can have the emotional ama, the energy of the emotion, get lodged in the energetic body, like in the chakras, as emotional patterns, or even lodged into the energies that feed certain organs or certain parts of the body. Mm. And in that sense, get lodged in the physical. And that can be a setup, just as ama is a setup for a disease. It can be a setup for conditions, disabilities, for ultimately imbalances that lead to disease. Mm. If there's a constant pushing away of the experience of emotion, can get held, some of the emotions, particularly for kids, they often don't have the awareness or the intellectual knowledge to know how to process, or their parents don't teach them how to process. And so they start to hold it in their posture. And so you can see somebody with rounded shoulders and with that kind of lack of confidence. Sometimes the rounded shoulders are just trying to protect the center, protect the heart.
Yes.
And so it gets lodged in that way. And this is where actually yoga that is really oriented more towards the energetic and towards the chakras and so forth can have great value. And where it can be great preparation for meditation. When we, in the practice of yoga and using the breath, and the postures accentuate a certain area of the body, and they often accentuate a certain chakra, and we can begin to be becoming aware of and releasing this energy that's been held of emotion. And as we process that, then when we go to meditate, the emotion and its energy don't get pushed into the mind and disturb the meditation. And so that's why we've worked with several yoga teachers and developed this healing light yoga that one of our faculty is teaching as a Vedic somatic kind of therapy. Vedic somatic therapy is what she's calling it now, instead of healing light yoga.
Great.
And so it's a way of dealing with the emotions that have been stuck in the body. And I can't help but think, part of the reason that we worked in developing this is I just had the sense that the ancient yogis really knew all of this stuff. They didn't codify it. They just knew it intuitively that, oh, yes, of course, this stuff gets stuck in the body and we're moving those energies. And this is, great preparation for meditation and so forth.
Taking a moment out here to bring you a word from the sponsor, Mount Madonna Institute. The mission of Mount Madonna Institute is to educate and empower future health professionals. Their Level 1 Ayurvedic Health Counselor program is the perfect entry into professional Ayurvedic training, and it is the gateway to becoming an Ayurvedic yoga therapist. The health counselor training focuses on preventive and mind-body health care. Classes are held in person and online. This program starts January 2023, and you can receive $100 off this program if you register before November 30th using the discount code ELEMENTS22. See the show notes or visit mountmadonnainstitute.org for further details. Okay, let's go back to my conversation with Dr. Dugliss. So in digesting emotions, what's your thoughts on, say, for example, a person went through some traumatic experience and there's a fear about, reliving or talking about that. Do you find that if you just work with the subtle, the emotional body, that it's not necessary to go through the details of that experience, that you can process these emotions by working with the different sheets of the body and release it that way rather than going through the trauma of the situation?
Yeah. So there's, this is where it's very individual.
Yeah.
And to answer your question, definitely. I've had people been able to, just through meditation alone, not even doing any of healing light yoga or any of these other therapies, I've had people just be able to release that not have to relive it. And I would just caution people and practitioners to really know that there's a time and place to working with a trauma therapist.
Absolutely, yeah.
Somebody whose expertise is creating safety in that process of releasing traumas. And so, just don't jump outside your scope of practice.
I agree. And I think I know I've asked you this before in another episode, but I think it's important to cover it. And I know in my own experience, when I'm working with clients, if there is something like that I'm seeing, I just ask them, are you talking to a professional who's in this area? And I think that's really important for them to get that support, like you said, not to go outside your scope of practice. And also, would you agree that there is an intersection and healing occurs at the intersection between the physical healing, the digestive system, and healing like the nervous system as well? That, these systems are integrated. Therefore, we have to look at the body holistically and work on both?
In principle, I often say, sometimes it's like the old Freudian, Freud was always big into all these symbols of, that things are wombic symbols or phallic symbols and all this. And he was sitting around with his students, and the student was talking, and he pointed out, oh, well, that's definitely, a phallic symbol, or, and that's what that dream is all about or something. And the student got a little bit incensed and looked at Freud and said, well, you're always smoking a cigar. What do you think that's about? and Freud said, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. So sometimes we have physical problems that are just physical. We're taking, food that's not good for us. Yes. We're taking, in from the environment, we're getting, these pesticides and that kind of stuff. And sometimes the problems are just physical. Are we, sprain an ankle or something? It's a physical kind of thing.
Sure. But
I would say, in my experience, the majority of the time, it's not. It's a reflection. Often a reflection of what's going on in the emotional body. And so, or even higher in the sort of causal body, where there's some lesson, or there's some metaphor that's at play. And so having like knee problems, well, that may be from an old injury, but it may also be that, the knees support us, and, that there's a feeling of stuckness that has been there because one feels unsupported. And so, again, that this all points to where awareness is important. So we've talked before about the importance of meditation in regards to healing. And meditation expands our ability to be aware. So we become aware of, oh yes, I've really had this sense in the background of feeling unsupported. And then the emotional processing, where we heart center and we are fully present to that awareness, and we look for, we release the energy and we look for the wisdom. And when that's done to completion, when it fully is processed, then often the knee pain goes away.
And so in order for us to have this awareness in our busy world with lots of distraction, we need to create that quiet time.
Yes, we do need to create. Meditation is important for healing. It's important for our inner growth and development, for our spiritual growth. And it's important for expanding our awareness. And so it's, it's just been my experience over and over again. The people in my practice who take up meditation, they heal 2, 3, sometimes 5 times faster than those who don't. And so it becomes very important. Also important, and when I'm teaching the heart-based meditation, I really say it's 2 techniques. There's an inward technique. There's an integration technique that has to do with heart centering during the day, during our activity, so that we're more in that expanded awareness and more aware of our being and the joy of being. And we're bringing that to whatever arises. We're bringing whatever emotion arises, whatever event arises. We're bringing that joy, that love to that experience. And that really sets a strong foundation for expanding awareness and integrating that awareness, and for emotional digestion, where we really can practice and learn to love whatever arises.
Right. So you're basically processing in the moment.
Exactly. Exactly. And it is not a practice of escaping. Oh, we need to transcend, I'm feeling fear. Well, I need to transcend the fear.
Yeah.
No, it's not about transcending. I mean, that's good for monks. For those in the world, it's about being in the light and love that we are, and bringing that to whatever arises. Yeah. And integrating spirit into the daily life. It's an integration process, not a transcending process. And so it's really about loving what arises. Right.
Which can really help with our perception of a situation.
Which it can. And it gives us some resilience, some buffer. So yes. Oh, well, yes, I'm feeling anxious, and well, I'm loving that. And, and then we see the wisdom, and then we're able to process and digest it much more easily, much more quickly. And often, as you're saying, it starts to happen spontaneously if we can remain heart-centered, if we've learned how to heart-center in the sense, not in the emotional sense, but in the spiritual practice sense.
So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about this, the heart centering, the heart-based meditation, because this is the practice that will help us have that awareness as we navigate our day, as we navigate different things that happen to us and our emotions, and help us be more present and looking at situations or coming into situations with more of an open heart.
Yeah, I find it to be really fundamental, and it transforms the quality of our inner experience in our lives. And as I was mentioning, it's two techniques that really form the basis of the practice. And there's the inward technique, which is a way of coming to the pure consciousness, that the awareness that we are, and experiencing that without thoughts, without feelings, without sensations, really going beyond all those to experience that being that we are just by itself. And as we do that systematically, 2 things happen. One is that our awareness expands. Awareness itself, the container of awareness, gets bigger. The other thing is that it does also spontaneously purify out some of the old stresses and programming and impressions that have gone deep into the mind. To accelerate that, though, we come to know through exploring the heart space itself, we come to know the different levels of our being. And so, it's like the koshas, or the physical, the energetic, the emotional, mental, the intuitive, causal, and the spiritual, all these different levels. We come to know these in this training within our own heart space. And that gets us oriented to the light and love that exists within, that it gets us oriented to the Ananda aspect of Sat Chit Ananda, the bliss aspect. Sat, this is more, I guess, from yoga, but Sat being eternal, Chit being consciousness, and Ananda, bliss, that is the nature of consciousness itself. Well, in order to really know the bliss value, we need to be able to sit right there before the pure consciousness, before we transcend, and we come to know that level of the subtlest spiritual. And really in this way, this effortless way of using sound, we come to experience that subtle energy. And so we come to know the bliss of being, and we come to know the source of love, and we come to know the love and light within us and the love and light around us, the more and more we practice this meditation. And then we accelerate the whole thing and the integration of that by, during the day, centering our awareness in that heart space, or using the heart space to center into the bliss of being, and bring that presence to whatever we're doing. The other aspect of it is, as we explore that space, particularly in our activity, we come to know the various facets of that more spiritual heart. We come to know the energies that are the foundation for gratitude, for the practice of gratitude, the foundation for the practice of forgiveness, and the foundation for the practice of acceptance. We come to know it in the experience of our own heart space, in the experience of our own being. And that tremendously accelerates our inner growth and development. The integration process is tremendously accelerated. And emotional digestion happens more easily, more spontaneously.
And as you said, it is a practice. Myself, it's a continuous practice. I forget a lot. It's a continuous practice, but it leads to less residue, or less like ama accumulation, right? Because you're processing in the moment. You have awareness in the moment.
Exactly. And instead of the mind trying to be in gratitude, we have an experience within our own heart space that is a foundation for that. So the gratitude becomes more spontaneous.
Right.
The acceptance becomes more spontaneous. The ability to be in presence becomes more spontaneous.
Yes, absolutely. And so you have this heart-based meditation program. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, the training to get both of the techniques takes place an hour a week for 4 weeks. We usually do like 10 a.m. Eastern time on Saturdays. And the next 4-week course is starting on October 22nd. And you sign up at heartbasedmeditation.com. So it's all run together, no hyphen, heartbasedmeditation.com. You'll see there's an events tab there. Just go under the events tab and you'll find the training in heart-based meditation
Great. And I took this program and I found it extremely helpful. And thank you so much for offering this program. And yeah, I found it extremely helpful. And like I said, it's still a practice. So I find that I have even more awareness now in my everyday activities, and hoping that as I continue to practice, it will be more spontaneous.
Oh, yes, it will. It's a matter of time and intention. You just have to have that intention and it'll be there.
Right. Yeah.
And you think. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, knowing that with this practice, and I want to invest in this practice because knowing that it will be easier to navigate life. And like, as I said, there'll be less physical, emotional accumulation. It's a beautiful practice and a great reminder. And also, I want to ask you about your other programs that you offer at New World Ayurveda.
Yeah, thanks. You used the word invest, and I forgot to mention we don't charge for the training and heart-based meditation. Yes.
And that's very kind of you. It's a great training, and I really recommend that people check it out. And thank you for offering that.
Yeah. So we do have an Ayurvedic health practitioner training program, as well as a spiritual mentoring program where you learn to teach the heart-based meditation and heart centering and all the facets of the heart and those heart-based spiritual practices. And you can find more information at newworldayurveda.com for those trainings. So that is New World Ayurveda, all run together, no hyphens.com.
Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Before we finish up here, Dr. Dugliss, is there anything else you want to share?
There was a book that I wrote called Capturing the Bliss on the yoga of emotions, Ayurveda and the yoga of emotions. Unfortunately, it's out of print right now, but you can still find used copies on Amazon.
Okay.
And so this is where I go into more detail of this whole, all the elements of processing and some of the elements of, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha type emotions and what's needed for them. Great. So I just thought, if people really have an interest in exploring that more, that they might be able to find an old copy.
Excellent. That's Capturing the Bliss.
Yes.
Wonderful. So Dr. Dugliss, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Colette.
Take care. Bye for now.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Dr. Dugliss, and please check out the show notes for all the links mentioned in this episode. If you think that this episode will be helpful to family or friends, please share it with them so we can spread this wonderful wisdom of Ayurveda and yoga. And if you haven't already subscribed or followed the podcast, please do so. And if you would like to rate and review it, I would really appreciate that. If you want to know more about my online services, you can check that out on elementshealingandwellbeing.com. And if you want to follow me on social media, I'm under Elements Healing and Wellbeing on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take good care of yourself, be well, and bye for now. Slán go fóill.